Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on the key pillars for delivering effortless customer service. My name is Courtney Sherman, and I work on the product marketing team here for the Service Cloud, the customer service platform that allows companies of all sizes to create effortless customer experiences by enabling companies to support every customer, anytime, and anywhere. We are so excited to be hosting Nick Toman from the CEB today. And before I get started, I just want to review a couple of things of how you'll interact with us during the broadcast. So first is the questions button in the upper left corner of your screen. If there's anything you'd like to ask Nick or myself, please click the button and type your question. We've left time to answer audience questions at the end of the presentation, and we'll get to as many as we can. You may also want to use the questions button if you encounter any technical issues during the call. We want to make sure our webinars offer valuable content and meet audience expectations. So please also take a moment after the presentation and tell us how we did using the Rate This button, which you'll see right next to the questions button. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So again, I am so excited to introduce Nick Toman, who is a managing director at the CEB, the leading member-based advisor company. Nick is a co-author of the Effortless Experience, Conquering the New Battleground for Customer Loyalty. And for the past decade, he's conducted numerous research studies in the space for customer service and sales effectiveness, and presented these findings to Fortune 500 business leaders and management teams. Nick's expertise spans a variety of topics, as you can see here. With that, I'm going to go ahead and let Nick take it away.
Great. Thanks so much, Courtney, and thanks to everybody who's joining us and spending some of your valuable time with us today. And what I want to do is take you through a bit of a journey. And it's an interesting journey that we've been on here at CEB over the course of really the past, I'd say about 7 to 8 years, going deep within the customer experience and trying to understand what really drives excellence in the service function. And this journey, it's taken us to some really interesting and intriguing places. And I think one of the key findings coming out of this work is that some of the foundational truths, some of the sort of cornerstones of what we've come to believe drive service excellence and the outcomes that we aspire to in the service channels, well, in many cases, I think there's, as you're going to see, going to be occasion to question some of those cornerstones. Some of the data we found and some of the research that we've conducted surprised us to the extreme. In fact, I can recall several occasions where we were having meetings at midnight trying to determine what exactly is this data telling us, because it runs counter to everything we thought we understood about customer service, customer loyalty, what drives the customer outcomes that we're all aspiring toward. So with that, let me start our journey off by giving you a sense of a story that helps kind of define what those foundations of customer service are that we all aspire to. Now, a lot of you may know this character. Many of you probably won't know this character. This guy is Joshy the Giraffe, and he is the property, and I should say really the best friend, of a 5-year-old boy named Timmy Hearn from Orlando, Florida. Now, Timmy and his family went on vacation to the Amelia Island Ritz-Carlton a couple years ago. In fact, they had a week off. Timmy's dad, unfortunately, couldn't make the trip. He went out to a business conference out in California, but his mom, Joshy, and Timmy all went to this fantastic resort, the Ritz-Carlton on Amelia Island. And they had a great time. They played in the sand. They spent time in the water. They toured the property. They had so much fun. And they got home on Sunday evening, about 8 o'clock, pulled into their driveway just as Dad was getting home from his conference and his week away out in California, and went to put Timmy to bed. And lo and behold, they realized the problem. Timmy had lost his best friend in the whole world, this giraffe. And so Timmy does what any 5-year-old at that witching hour does. He went completely apoplectic nuclear on him, lost his mind, started crying through a fit. And so his dad did what any sane, rational, normal parent would do in this instance, is he told Timmy a little white lie. No, Timmy, don't worry. Joshy, he didn't get lost. He's not gone. He just decided to stay back at Amelia Island. He was having such a great time. You think he deserves some time off, don't you? And Timmy kind of shook his head and said, yeah, I guess so. And they finally got him calmed down, finally got Timmy put to bed. Timmy's mom quickly runs out to the living room, fires up her computer, starts surfing the web to find a new giraffe. and Timmy's dad retreats to his bedroom to put some things away, and he checks his phone, and he's got a voicemail. Now, his voicemail's from the Ritz-Carlton, and it was a loss prevention manager. And the loss prevention manager was just simply asking for the address so that he could return this giraffe that they found in the room's laundry back to the family. And so Timmy's dad, his name's Chris. Chris called the Ritz-Carlton back, spoke with the loss prevention team, gave him his address, told him about the little white lie, the little fib he had told Timmy, and hung up the phone thinking nothing of it, expecting the Ritz-Carlton would ship back the giraffe in a couple days. And so what happened was that loss prevention manager got together with his team and he said, we have an opportunity here to do something spectacular for this customer. And now normally the loss prevention manager and most of us in that position would have just put this giraffe in a box, put a couple of postage stamps on it and sent it out. But what he and his team did was pretty remarkable. Take a look at this. And you want to talk about the moment of wow, the moment of surprise, sort of shock and awe for this customer. Well, they gave Joshy the giraffe his extended vacation. There he is in the upper left, hanging out poolside. He's getting his massage in the upper right with the requisite cucumbers over the eyeballs. Lower left, making some new friends. Lower right, he's playing around to golf on the beach. I got to tell you, this giraffe had a far better summer than I even thought was possible for myself. All thanks to Ritz-Carlton. And so Joshy got that extended vacation. So the company packed up these pictures, put them in a nice photo album, put all kinds of Ritz-Carlton swag and merchandise in a box, and sent it out overnight to the family. Next morning they got it. Timmy got proof of Joshy's extended vacation. It was a fantastic story. His dad, Chris, just so happens, Chris Hearn, happens to be a pretty prominent blogger with the HuffPost. And so this story went viral in a real hurry. Now, why is it that the Ritz-Carlton did this? What's the belief here? Besides this, just at some level, at a human level, really feeling good to do to a customer, kind of inspired the loss prevention team. They certainly had some fun with it. The thought here is that we do this to lock a customer in, right? We make a customer loyal for life by treating them with this level of service. We aspire to go above and beyond to shock and delight the customer. And this story trickles down through all these organizations globally. They hear of this story and start to ask their frontline employees, why can't we deliver this level of service? Why can't we aspire to this standard? Right? Service managers get that question all the time. CEOs constantly asking vice president of customer service or technical support, why can't we delight customers to this capacity? And they in turn come to us. They come to organizations like ours, CEB, where we do research on how to enable this type of service. And so we did what we always do. We turned to research, and we wanted to understand on behalf of our member companies globally, how can we deliver this level of service? And so we asked ourselves 3 framing questions. The first is what impact does customer service interactions even remotely have on customer loyalty? And how we make customers want to do more business with us, not just behaviorally, but how do we evoke an attitude, an emotional response that helps customers connect better with our companies? Question 2, what are the things then that customer service can specifically do to drive these types of loyalty outcomes at a tactical, practical level? What can we go implement right now, within a year, across the next 3 years to get this done? And all that while being mindful of something that I think is a very large reality, or very present reality for all of us in the customer service space, is how do we do this while being mindful of the bottom line? Because for most of us in a service operation, let's just face it, at the end of the day, we are a cost center for most of our businesses. So how do we do all of this, increase loyalty in the near term, without a huge amount of capital investment, and hopefully being mindful of our operating costs? And so the way that we got after this research was we conducted multiple studies. I'll tell you a little bit about those studies as we go through the teleconference today. But all of this culminates in the book, The Effortless Experience. Now, we published this book late last year. Some of you may have seen it. Some of you may have heard about it. We're going to take you through the key findings from this research and talk about some of the pillars of what companies who aspire to this notion of effortless experience are doing. But first, as we get into this journey, let me just baseline everybody in terms of how we think about loyalty. This is a really important definition, and in many cases, loyalty is a misunderstood concept. Oftentimes, I think we tend to err on the side of loyalty as being this sort of squishy, amorphous idea. The reality is that there's very, very clear economic impact of customer loyalty. So let's talk a little bit about what that economic impact is. First, it's not just that customers purchase from us initially, but that they repurchase time and time again with our company. And hopefully along the path towards that repurchase, they're spending more with us over time. Their share of wallet is going to increase from that customer. And finally, in contrast to those first two bullets, which are largely what we would classify as behavioral loyalty, right? I show you loyalty with my pocketbook. The last one here is this notion of word of mouth. That customers say good things and hopefully say fewer bad things about our organization. This is the idea of attitudinal loyalty or emotional loyalty. Okay? So they want to grow with us as we grow our businesses and say good things about us, make recommendations, and sing praises of our products and our services. So those three are the holy trinity, if you will, of customer loyalty, and that is how we denominate all of this research. Now, what's really interesting about customer loyalty is there's great many things that drive customer loyalty, ranging from our brands, our products, all the different hundreds of thousands of touch points that we have with our customers, some of us on a global basis, some of us on a regional basis. But you think about all those opportunities we have to influence our customers' lives, influence their businesses, influence the outcomes that they care about. The reality is we know customer loyalty is most at risk when things don't go exactly as planned. And that's why we focused on this notion of customer service in particular, to understand what do we really need to get right within the loyalty equation, particularly when things have gone wrong. So if we can understand this, the true gauntlet of customer loyalty, when these things go off the tracks, when the unexpected happens, when at the very least the customer has a question, a concern, but more likely something's broken, it's not working, their business might be suffering, their personal life might be suffering, something mission critical may be going on. What's at stake there, and how can we drive the best outcomes possible? So let's go through our findings. I'm going to move quickly through our study. 125,000 customers across many different industries, many different geographies, many different types of service operations they're interacting with, ranging from technical support, break-fix type environments, B2C, B2B, highly complex, highly transactional. We surveyed over 5,000 reps. Thank you to the companies listening who gave us access to their customers and to their service reps to understand what do the reps do, how are they managed, what type of environment do they work within, how are they enabled, what types of tools, training, et cetera, do we give our reps. And finally, we surveyed very in-depth 100 companies to understand at a very detailed level their operational drivers, how they think about the operations, their metrics, their operating philosophies, you name it. Three major findings from all this research. Finding number one, take us back to our Joshi story. A great story about that moment of wow that the Ritz-Carlton delivered and the outcome that that has on customers. Well, the first finding that we came across was, in our minds, a bit of a surprise. Dare I even say a bit of a bummer to us. And as people who research customer service for a living here at CEB, this was something that one of those midnight meetings I mentioned at the beginning of our call happened around, was the finding that, well, delight doesn't seemingly pay. Well, what do we mean by that? Well, if you think about the relationship between customer loyalty on the y-axis, that vertical axis there, and customers having their expectations met, us performing below those expectations or us exceeding those expectations, the typical relationship that most of us would assume exists between customer expectations and loyalty looks something like this. This is the perception. That as we perform below customer expectations, customers are going to be less loyal to our organizations. That is no surprise. But as we begin to meet expectations, we see a little bit of a loyalty increase. However, it isn't until we push well out into this realm of exceeding customer expectations do we see that dramatic, sweeping, sort of hockey stick curve there where we recognize the payout in terms of much greater customer loyalty. So that is the perception. And that is, quite frankly, the hypothesis that me and my team, we entered going into this research with. What we found is something completely different. The reality is that you see this very sort of dramatically flattening curve as you push out of the realm of performing below customer expectations into the realm of meeting and then finally exceeding customer expectations. Now, in some cases, we might look at this and say, wow, that's a bit of a bummer, isn't it? That's a bit of a buzzkill. Well, what are we trying to do here in service? Well, I think there's two ways to look at it. There's certainly a glass half empty view, which is, boy, that's a bit of a bummer. The glass half full view here, however, is that by simply meeting customer expectations and doing so on an extremely consistent level, we're recognizing the maximum economic impact that we can have in terms of total customer outcomes. By pushing out into this realm of exceeding customer expectations, there is a marginal uptick we see in terms of customer loyalty, but that comes at a very, very high cost. Not only do we know that delight rarely happens, this notion of exceeding customer expectations out there on the far right happens 16% of the time. So in many cases, I often joke, well, it turns out a strategy of hope likely is better than a strategy of delight. It's very difficult to do this. 16% of time across 125,000 customer interactions. It's not exactly the most confidence-inducing number there, but it costs a lot more to aspire to this level of service. When we exceed customer expectations, we do things such as added givebacks, discounts, added manual labor and manual work, added training, added handle times for those of us working in a phone channel. All of those numbers begin to add up and add up in a very real way. The cost that we see the typical service organization incur in these moments of exceeding customer expectations ranges on average from 10 to 20% greater operating costs. Now you take a number that if you think about your total budget for a contact center and you add 20% to that number, it starts to make you sick. And the reality is, when we push out in this realm of exceeding customer expectations, we are incurring those costs. It is very unlikely to happen. And so we do have to call into question, is it worth it? Is it worth it? When what we know is that simply meeting those customer expectations, those baseline customer expectations, matters tremendously. And quite frankly, as we'll show you in a bit here with some additional data, it's not happening that often at all. Now, there's two reasons. There's two reasons why this relationship exists. So let's go into a little bit of the justification. One of the reasons is really interesting, and this is far more at a psychological level, far more at a human level, as to why this relationship looks like this flattening curve. The other is at a very practical level, just that given the hand that we are dealt in the customer service and customer support functions that we all work with. So I'll get to the sort of human side first, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about the practical side. Now, just this past May, just last month, a really fascinating study was done and released here in the Social, Psychological, and Personality Science magazine. This is, for a research geek like me, this is my beach reading. I'm joking, of course. But it was a fascinating study done by a behavioral psychologist at the University of Chicago, as well as a behavioral sociologist at the University of California at San Diego. They got together and they wanted to understand the dynamic of promises, and when promises are made and simply kept, what happens? What happens to the person to whom the promise was acted upon? When promises are made and broken, what happens? And when promises are made and then that promise is exceeded, what happens? And what's really interesting, the researcher who started this project, she had a series of interactions with a very prominent online retailer you all would know and love in many cases, where this company would send her the confirmation email of her order saying that her order would arrive in X number of days, and it always arrived one day early. No fail. Every single time she got that order one day early. And so she was thinking, boy, is this just really clever marketing on this company's part? Are they actually creating loyalty? Or is this a cost that they're incurring and there's not much upside to it? And that was the genesis of the study. And so they went out there and they created a variety of different scenarios where a promise was made to somebody and the promise was kept. The promise was broken or the promise was exceeded. They created a variety of these different experiments, and over the course of 3 different experiments, what they found is this. When companies, friends, or coworkers expend extra effort in order to exceed their promises, to go above and beyond, their effort appears likely to be overlooked. How they explain this is humans have what we call an asymmetry of response. Now, what exactly does that mean? Well, what it means is that we award very little credit to efforts that go above and beyond our expectations. Sure, it was great. Yeah, of course I'll take it. I'm happy to have the freebie. I'm happy to have the thing you're going to offer up that's greater than what I was expecting. However, if you fail to live up to the expectation of the promise that you made, I am with all of my power going to not give you any credit, going to say bad things about you, going to like you less and less as a person, as an organization, as a coworker, whatever it is. But that asymmetry of response is tremendous. So I'll give you a little bit of credit if you go above and beyond, but boy, will I take it away if you do not meet the expectation. And so at a human level, inherently we just have a harder time offering folks extra credit, extra points, or in this case, customer loyalty if you go above and beyond. Now, at a practical level, let's come back to our second key finding here. At a practical level, what we find is the majority of customer service interactions don't end up driving positive gains in loyalty. They end up driving disloyalty. Let me show you what I mean. What we found in our research across these 125,000 customer interactions is that for any incremental or positive gain in customer loyalty, we are 4 times more likely to drive disloyalty. Now, the way I want you to think about this finding for just a minute is so many of us, when we think about what drives customer loyalty, we start to lump sort of all these different drivers into a great big pie, if you will, of what drives customer loyalty. Things like our brand, like our product experiences, like our reputation in the marketplace, like customer service. And we lump all these things in as the things that drive customer loyalty. Well, what we are learning is that you can't think of customer loyalty as sort of a single pie. You need to break it out into 2 pies. One pie is what drives positive gains in customer loyalty. The other is what drives negative or disloyalty. So let's just take the positive loyalty pie. Think about this in your mind for just a minute. That positive bar you see there. What drives that? Well, that is largely things such as product experiences, the brand in the marketplace. For those of you in B2B environments, how you engage with your customer through the commercial conversation matters tremendously. We've done a lot of research in the sales space. Some of you will know our work on the Challenger sale, for instance. These are all things that drive positive gains in customer loyalty. But if we look at that other pie, the disloyalty pie, what drives disloyalty is dominated by customer service. And in many cases, that particular disloyalty didn't start as a customer service issue. It was likely a failed product issue. It was likely a failed commitment that we made on our part as a company. However, it takes form as a service issue, and it finds its way into our service channels. And so in many cases, if you think about just take an analogy from the world of football, let's say. It's like we're starting on the 1-yard line, and now we need to go 99 yards downfield to score a touchdown. We're starting from a very disadvantaged place in the service channel. And that customer, thinking back to the experiments that those academics ran on the previous page, customers have a hair trigger to reward us with disloyalty if we don't fail to resolve that problem quickly. Okay? So we are 4 times more likely to drive disloyalty. To use another sports analogy, that when I showed this to one company, they said to me, Nick, I think what this signals to us is we really have to think more about playing defense as opposed to playing offense. Our job is to really inhibit and prevent this disloyalty from occurring in the first place. And I think that's the right way to think about this. So what drives that disloyalty? Well, it's things such as repeat contacts. Customer had to contact us multiple times, sometimes in multiple channels, just to get the issue resolved. Along that path, they endured some channel switching where they started in the web, ended up in chat, then ended up in phone, then wrote a letter, then stopped at a branch, and on and on and on. Multiple different channels having been interacted with to resolve that issue. Transfers, and closely related to transfers, repeating information. Customer had to tell their story over and over and over again to anybody who was willing to listen and try to help resolve the issue. The whole pass the buck mentality that many of our frontline folks have. Boy, this is a tough issue. Send it over to another department. I can't handle your issue, Mr. Customer. I'm sorry. Let me transfer you to another department where you can tell them your story. Robotic service. Policies and processes that customers have to endure. Sorry, can't help you. That's the policy. And finally, the general hassle factor that we put customers through. These are the drivers of that tremendous amount of disloyalty. Now, any one of these, we look at them and we say, yeah, that's not unfamiliar territory for us. We get it. Repeat contacts. We track first contact resolution. We'll talk about that in just a minute here, how that is a bit of a flawed metric, but we track that, Nick. I hear you. We track channel switches. We're diligent about transfers. But the reality is when you step back, and you start to think about the number of instances that any one of these things are happening to any one of our customers in any given interaction, your head starts to swim. And not just what our dashboard says, but what customers tell us, because that's where the rubber really meets the road. And what we find is that in the vast majority of customer interactions, these are happening. This disloyalty is happening. And what it is this is customer effort. We are putting work onto our customers for them to attain resolution of their issue, for them to get the answer they need, for them to get on with their lives. Sorry, but you just signed up for a project, Mr. Customer. I know you're having a billing issue. Tough luck. Here's a new project. Here's your homework. Try to resolve the issue through our maze of complexity, through our website, through the maze of phone trees and people you're going to have to talk to. And at the end of half a day, you might have an answer. It is customer effort. And customer effort's the absolute killer. So if we go back to that analogy of we need to play better defense in the service channel, our third finding there at the top of the page is we have to be centered on mitigating disloyalty by reducing customer effort. That needs to be our rallying cry. And not until we have done this, can we or should we remotely focus on above and beyond service. We have got to get these basics right because they are permeating and saturating the customer experience and taking all sorts of loyalty credit away from us. Let me show you just a little bit more if you haven't quite bought into the notion of customer effort. We created a metric, some of you will know it, the customer effort score. And this particular metric tracks just that. How much energy or how much effort do customers have to put into an interaction with your organization? Let's look at the impact they have on our loyalty definition here. So first we start with repurchase. For customers putting forth low effort in the service interaction, 94% of them indicate a likelihood or willingness to repurchase. Compare that to high effort interactions, only 4%. Let me just be clear, I see a lot of data. I swim in data soup all day long. It is extremely rare that we see data this completely polarizing. Let's take the next loyalty attribute. Increased spend or share of wallet. We see a similar story here, 88 to 4. Low effort to high effort. Let's switch gears for just a second. We're going to look at negative word of mouth here. Negative word of mouth. So we hope that relationship looks a little bit the opposite of those first two bars, and lo and behold, it does. If I have low effort in my service experience, I am only 1% likely to gripe or complain about a company versus high effort. 81% of the time I will go out there and I will say bad things. By the way, a couple interesting things we know about negative word of mouth and positive word of mouth for that matter. When customers say positive things about our companies, and we know this because we've analyzed all the verbatim out there, they tend to say positive things about our products. But when they say negative things, almost exclusively it is about the service experiences that they endure. By the way, when customers say negative things, they tell 3 to 4 times more people about those negative experiences than they do the positive. Now you couple that with today's social media platforms, and imagine every single one of us can think of a time when you logged on to Facebook or got on Twitter and you saw a friend who had mentioned something about a company underwhelming them, let's say, in the service channel. So when you put it all together, what you find is that overall disloyalty is greatly impacted by this idea of effort. And in fact, we believe tracking customer effort to be among the very best leading indicators of disloyalty. Yes, a metric around disloyalty, of disloyalty out there. We're going to show you that customer effort score at the end of the TC today. You are welcome to use that customer effort score, drop it into your post-transactional surveys, and start to record that. So what do we do about this? Well, there's 4 pillars that we found the best organizations deploying to get after this idea of customer effort. Today, we're going to touch on 2 of the pillars very briefly. I'll tell you what all 4 are here. Channel stickiness is the first. We're going to go into detail here, so I'm going to hold off on going further on this one, as well as next issue avoidance. We're going to talk briefly about that over the course of the next 15 minutes. The third pillar is this idea of experience engineering. Now, experience engineering isn't simply soft skills and being nice to a customer in an interaction. We're so often trained on methods such as, say, the DISC approach, or analytics and expressives and controllers and entertainers and how to work with these different types of individuals. It's not soft skills in that capacity. Experience engineering is using very deliberate and calculated language, in fact, much of it based and rooted in a kind of basic negotiation training to help customers feel better about the options that we have for them. In many cases, we don't have the optimal answer. We can't do the thing they're asking. But instead of offering a customer a no, there's ways to position alternatives, position the answer that helps that customer feel like we are really on their side, that we are advocating on their behalf. And what we found is that dramatically reduces the amount of effort that they've had to put into an interaction. We've got a whole chapter in the book on that. And lastly, frontline control. Now, frontline control as the fourth pillar is one that, man, I would love to get out of my soapbox about this one. This is one I feel so strongly about. But if there's any one area inside of our corporations where we exude or give or grant less control, it is that at the frontline service rep level. The folks who are engaging with our customers, who are touching our customers directly, they operate in an environment of very little trust, of very high scrutiny, of just unrealistic expectations in terms of the QA scorecards we put out there and the metrics we ask them to abide by, and in many cases limiting their ability to engage as a human with just another human. And so we have a whole chapter on how to do that in an intelligent, fiscally responsible way in the book, but mind you, it must happen. This has to happen in today's era of heightened customer expectations where the easy issues have gone the route of self-service, and we are left with the harder issues in our live channels. So on the point of self-service, let's dive into that first pillar, channel stickiness. We start with just a question here. Which channel would you rather use? Here you are checking in for your flight. You got a couple options. You can either pull out that iPhone, your smartphone, fire up your email, and get your ticket, or get your ticket at the kiosk there, or go wait in the line for the ticketing agent. Increasingly, what we find time and time again is almost all of us opt for the upper left option in some way, shape, or form. In fact, it's funny because I do this talk live often, and I ask the audience, who used a ticket agent, and the only people who ever used a ticket agent anymore, I swear, are people who are checking in their golf clubs. Kind of become a running joke. So it's interesting that our preferences have shifted so dramatically in favor of that self-service, and you hear all kinds of reasons for it, right? Added control, added convenience. The self-service is interesting. It's one of the rare sort of win-wins that we have as a company where it's good for our bottom line, and customers love it. Fantastic. But here's the challenge, is that if you go out there and you ask most leaders, most service leaders and most executives across our organizations what that preference looks like for today's customer set, what they'll tell you is, yeah, sure, we see some web self-service usage, but most customers still prefer to call us. Most customers want to have the interaction at a human level. Our customers want to talk to us. And the reality is, most of your customers actually don't want to talk to you. What we found through the course of some very rigorous conjoint analysis, for those of you who are sort of my fellow data geeks out there, you'll appreciate that. What we found through some very rigorous analysis is that, in fact, customer preference for the web and the phone is about dead equal right now across the majority of our customer base. Now, I get the question almost always when I show this slide. Now, Nick, I get it if this was just the millennials, if this was just our 18, 20, 24-year-olds. But what about our 60, 70-year-old customers? Surely that trend can't look dead equal for those customers. And I say absolutely not. We do see some variance in that. Firstly, it is not as extreme as you'd think. Secondly, I often ask the question, at what age do you think that tipping point occurs where phone preference and web preference begin to get even? And that age is about 55 years old, is where we see the tipping point. Beyond 55, so 55 and older, have a phone preference. Under 55, have a web preference. Here's another interesting question. If we look at that 2.5 to 1 on the left-hand side, guess what age that represents? Just think to yourself, what age might that represent? That's about a 77-year-old customer over there on the left-hand side. So the mentality, the perception, the way that our leadership teams operate is under the pretenses of serving a 77-year-old customer. Now, AARP, you might be on the line today. I've presented this several times over where you've been in the audience and it's always a good joke. But for most of us, that's not our core demographic. Now, the other issue that often comes up is urgency, complex issues, when the stakes are higher. And fair enough, I will grant you, when you see more urgent issues where the stakes are indeed higher or more complex issues, there is a proclivity to call in more often. Though, again, it is nowhere near as pronounced as most of us think. Okay, we've done an immense amount of analysis against that. And the question I often have to you when you think about issue complexity is, let's take a scenario of your kids. A lot of you on the lines will have kids. 9 o'clock at night, and you hear one of your kids upstairs crying. You go upstairs, you check on them, and you realize they've got a fever. What's the first thing that we do nowadays? We pull out the computer, we fire up WebMD, and we check it out. What's going on with our kids? Now, I don't know if the stakes are any higher than my kid's health, but I certainly feel comfortable with what WebMD tells me. If I need to go then get to a hospital immediately, well, then I can go take that action. But my first port of call, my first triage point, I feel pretty comfortable with self-service. And increasingly, we're seeing that trust level just increase with web self-service. But here's the reality. As we say, okay, Nick, I get it. The preference out there is one where web is becoming more and more prominent. How come the phone is still ringing? Well, the reason the phone is still ringing is that the majority of customers, yeah, they're going to the web, but our website is failing them tremendously. 58% of your current phone callers have been to your website. So just take a sample right now, point in time, those of you on the phone with your service reps, with your salespeople right now have been to the website. We force them to switch channels. By the way, each time they switch channels from web to phone, that is a 10% decrease in their loyalty levels. Now here's the real sort of gut punch, is that 36% of those customers are still on the web as they're talking to your reps. They are there. I had one CFO look at this slide and he said, so let me get this right, Nick. We're essentially paying for our customers to be more disloyal. Yeah, that's kind of the cynical way to look at it. And so we step back and we look at this. We say, gosh, our website must be failing customers. Well, what do we do about it? And for most companies, the knee-jerk reaction is, well, we need more options. We need to add more functionality. We got to keep up with our competitor. They just added chat. I guess we need chat too. And from a customer experience standpoint, the thought here is that we have to be able to serve an infinite number of issues in an infinite number of channels. However the customer wants to be served, we're happy to serve them that way. If the customer wants to skateboard down the street wearing a virtual reality helmet and solve an issue, by God, we're going to be able to help them do that. And so we add all these options and all this functionality into our website. But what we found in our data is that knee-jerk reaction is not the right reaction. Customer choice, providing them all these options in these channels, is not the right answer. We did some really interesting analysis, and the top-line finding from this analysis told us this. 16%, only 16% of your customers value choice over ease. Now, what does that mean? What it means is that these customers, come hell or high water, I'm going to choose the channel I want to interact in, and that is the channel I'm going to stay in. By the way, these are your die-hard phone callers. It is almost a perfect correlation. Those who want the phone are these who value choice over what we call ease. Now, let me contrast this with the other 84% of customers out there who value ease over choice. What we mean by that is these customers don't care what channel they're in. They just want an easy, quick, efficient resolution. You know what, company? You probably know better than I do. Just tell me where to go. If it's best to email you, I'm happy to do that. If it's best to chat, I'm happy to do that. If it's best to co-browse, I'm happy to let you do that. If it's best to call, I'm happy to do that. I don't care. I'm fine with any of these channels, and that's how most customers feel. Now, the companies that are leading the pack here in terms of creating a very rationalized, very simple online experience for their customers are practicing this idea of what we call guided resolution. Let me give you a sense of what guided resolution looks like, and this is sort of the Cadillac of guided resolution. This is the Amazon support site. A lot of you will know this Amazon support site. For those of you who look at it and say, yeah, well, Amazon's invested a tremendous amount of money in this platform, and I'll tell you how it works in just a second here, but we can't do that. I want you to go to mastercard.com when you have a moment. Okay? So don't check out on the TC right now, but when you have a moment, go to mastercard.com because they've done something very similar in a far more cost-effective manner. But here's how the Amazon site works, and this is just brilliant. For those of you who logged on and served through Amazon's site, you'll know how this works. But at the top of the screen there, you'll see the question, what can we help you with? Is it an order you placed? Is it Kindle, or is it something else? Well, in this case, I had a Kindle issue. So I clicked Kindle. Question 2, tell me more about your issue. Okay, well, my issue is I have a Kindle device that is having problems connecting to a wireless network. Specifically, it's a Kindle Fire HD, and I can't get on Wi-Fi. So I go through that simple drop-down menu. Number 3 there pops up, and it says, how would you like to contact us? You can email us, Nick, if you'd like. You can also chat with us if that's your cup of tea. But between you and me, Nick, you probably just want to pick up the phone and call us. See that, how it's highlighted recommended there in the middle? It's like Amazon saying, you know what, Nick, it's going to be way easier for you, way easier for us, and we're okay with it. Just call us. This is going to be better for all of us. It's going to be faster, easier, and get you on your way. Because it's kind of a complex issue. And so what's interesting, by the way, when you click call us, you put your phone number in, about 0.6 seconds later, Amazon calls you, and the rep says, Mr. Toman, I see you're having connectivity issues with your Kindle HD getting on Wi-Fi. Here's what I want you to do. Like, you read my mind. It's great. So this is guided resolution. Now, the interesting thing about guided resolution and this whole idea of simplicity in the self-service channel, rationalizing all these channels down to a few number of highly impactful interactions, is it's harder to get to simple than it is to get to comprehensive. It is harder to get to simple than it is to get to comprehensive. It is easy to add all sorts of functionality onto our websites. In fact, the average business-to-consumer company's website, their service website, has 25 choices for a customer to make, 25 equally right or wrong choices. The average B2B site has 48 choices, each one right or wrong as to where I begin my service interaction. So as Mark Twain, who said it best here, he said, years and years ago, I didn't have time to write you a short letter, so I wrote you a long one instead. Well, let's try to reverse this trend as we think about our web platforms and mitigate some of that channel switching that is so prevalent. Let me give you one more. This is a really fast one that we're going to end on, and then we're going to take some questions, but the idea of next issue avoidance. So there are instances, no doubt, where the customer will have to contact us in a live channel. We're going to have to talk to them. And one of the best ways that we can serve this customer is through next issue avoidance. Now, I often start this with asking, this is a bit of a rhetorical question, so think to yourself here, what is the worst question that a rep can ask? Here's a tip. The second worst question is, Mr. Customer, what are you wearing today? The very worst question a rep can ask is one that, frankly, boy, we hear this all the time. Have I fully resolved your issue today? Now, how in the world is that a bad question? Isn't that how we have every single call with? That's what we train our people. That's what's on the quality assurance form. Have I fully resolved your issue today? Well, here's why that's a terrible question. Because in reality, the customer has no idea. Now, yes, in some instances, it's clear. My device is working again. You solved the issue. Thank you. But what we're finding is that in an increasing number of instances, there is a very high likelihood that a related, downstream, tangential issue is going to crop up that we could have prevented during this initial interaction. And so when you go out and you look at your dashboard and you ask your operations team, how are we doing on our first contact resolution metric, you'll see something like this. Well, boss, we're running about 77% first contact resolution rate. That's what the dashboard says. Now, go and ask your customers. In fact, this is a really interesting exercise. Take a group of your frontline reps, and for just a week, tell them to ask the customer at the beginning of the call if the customer had tried to serve on this issue before. If the customer tried to contact you before, tried to self-serve, or spoke to another rep before that particular interaction, and just have them keep a little crib sheet right there at their desk. Because here's what you're going to find. Only 40% of customers are going to say, you know what, it was one and done. 60% of those callers are going to tell you, yeah, this is my second time calling for this. It doesn't seem like we quite put this issue to bed yet. Why is that? Well, it's all a matter of perspective and how we look at this. Because when we ask a customer, did we resolve the issue, and we note that as a check the box, yep, the customer said it was resolved, like I said, there's a high degree of likelihood that customer is going to have to call back. And in understanding why these customers call us back, we see two clear drivers for these callbacks. The first is what we call explicit issues. These are simple human issues. Just a mistake I made. We are human after all. We will make mistakes. The other is when we have systems or process issues. So having a suboptimal call management ticketing system will lead to some errors. It's very fortunate that we're on the line with Salesforce today and Service Cloud, who has some fantastic systems for us to think about. We always have to be pursuing the right systems to push that information to our front line, to get the information packaged in the right way, to take great notes and understand what happened. But the other side of the equation is the one we've largely ignored. It is the implicit issues. These are what we say here, 2 bullets, the adjacent issue. That is what we call a tangential or related, a downstream issue. We knew with a high degree of likelihood it's going to happen, and the customer's going to have to call us back. But I got this clock running. I got to get this customer off the line. I took care of that first issue. I'm not going to tell them about this whole second related issue and open that can of worms and turn this 5-minute call into a 6-minute call. No way. That's going to kill my handle time. So no, I'm not going to do that as a rep. And closely related, experience issues. Most common form of an experience issue is where a customer just doesn't feel confident in the answer they got. And so they want to double check. And they call us back just to make sure I got the right answer. That first rep didn't seem so sure of himself. When you look at how these break out, check this math out. Here we are on the left-hand side focused on those explicit issues, and this is where the majority of our energy and efforts have been invested in the past 20 years, is fixing those explicit issues. We just failed to resolve that initially stated customer issue. We are at a point of diminishing return in terms of getting explicit issues right. Like I said, these require system investments. These require Six Sigma and process engineering projects. This is big, hard, hairy, nasty work. Not to say we want to let our foot off the gas there. We have to stay diligent. However, there is this very ripe opportunity right in front of us. Nearly half, 46%, nearly half of the reasons customers call back are something that you can do something about in that call. Let me give you an example just to bring this to life. And then I'm going to show you our customer effort score and open it up for questions. So be thinking about your questions. Start to populate that question box in the upper left here, and we're going to take some questions in just a moment. But this story is a personal story. I have a 2-year-old kid. 2-year-olds, as many of you will know, make a tremendous mess. The Dyson vacuum in our house is one of the most treasured possessions that we have. And the other day, our Dyson vacuum went down. Big deal. So I tore it apart, as I'm apt to do. I like to fix things on my own, and I realized that that roller ball on the front is held in place by this pin. There was a pin that's kind of fallen out and bent a little bit that was inhibiting this roller ball from rolling the right way. So I called Dyson. And the rep there said, Mr. Toman, I've got the pin, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it in the mail here for you. Send it out overnight so you get it in a hurry. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 2 of the pins in this package. So I asked why. And the rep said, well, here's the deal. That pin is delicate. It is a fragile, light piece of aluminum. The first time you go to put that pin in, you're going to bend it. And you're going to be left with a worthless pin. So I'm including 2 pins so you can mess up once, and then you can get it right the second time. Sure enough, I got the first pin, and I did bend it. So I'm so glad I had that second pin because I would have had to call that company back and get another pin ordered. Just a fantastic example of next issue avoidance in action. So with that, let me give you guys a sense of, those are their first 2 pillars. We're going to go into the other 2 pillars. As I mentioned, you can find those in the book, but let me give you a sense of how you can think about this idea of customer effort. I think in many cases, the first thing to do is just to begin to have a conversation with your teams around ease of doing business, around the idea of being easy to do business with, around effort. I think what you'll find is that in many cases, the much easier conversation to have with your frontline supervisors, with your frontline teams, than a conversation around this idea of delight. Delight takes many, many, many different forms. But ask them where we're making it hard for our customers to interact with us, and they're going to give you 10 or 12 quick areas. In fact, it might turn into a little bit of a griping session because there's so many areas they get frustrated by when they're serving customers. They know exactly where we make our customers' lives difficult. It's very easy for them to wrap their heads around this idea of ease and how to make it easier. The second thing you can do is put in place a metric like this. This question you can use. This has been a very well validated and vetted question. This is our version 2.0 of the customer effort score. Some of you will probably know version 1.0, which we released back in 2010 in the Harvard Business Review in an article titled Stop Trying to Delight Your Customers. Well, since then, we've evolved our understanding of the question, and here's a little bit better way to ask it, but it is simply the company, insert your company's name there, made it easy for me to handle my issue. Strongly disagree to agree. And that is a wonderful, wonderful predictor of disloyalty. It is a fantastic leading indicator of disloyalty from that customer, as you see on the bottom there. As well as it has a very high correlation to driving your Net Promoter Score up. So if you are a Net Promoter shop, a lot of thoughts on Net Promoter Score, but generally is a great relationship at the broadest level, relationship metric. This particular transactional metric, the customer effort score, supports that relationship metric very nicely. So with that, let me go ahead and take some questions from the audience. I'm sure we've got some questions here. And you see some of the information here. If you guys do have follow-up questions, concerns, or want a copy of the presentation, please let us know, and you can see that information there. Courtney?
Thank you so much, Nick. That was fantastic. While you guys are asking your questions right now, just a few reminders. So this recording is available. You can come to the same link, or it's also at salesforce.com/events/webinars. Also, just a quick reminder to rate it. This helps us, again, plan for future webinars and make sure we're delivering content that matters to you. If you want to download the PDF of this presentation, you can do so with the attachments button. And finally, I wanted to remind everyone that our next webinar will be on June 25th, and it's about streamlining your customer service team and how Coldcraft uses the Service Cloud to do that. So now just switching over to questions. It looks like we just got the first one in. Anytime you ask a question and expect a response, would it be better to not have so many options, such as agree, somewhat agree, strongly agree, and go with agree, strongly agree, disagree, or strongly agree? Strongly disagree.
Yep, so I'll put on my my quant hat here for a moment. We ask questions here at CEB on a 7-point scale. It's commonly referred to as a Likert scale. It is a way to ensure the highest amount of variability in your sample so you can do analysis to understand what's driving the outcome. So we like a 7-point scale because it creates a spread in your sample that lets you run more sensitivities in the analysis. Now, a lot of you will not have a 7-point spread in your current surveys. You might have a 5-point scale. What I would urge you to do is, using that question, if you want, go ahead and use it, just condense it down to a 5-point scale. Make sure it matches the other questions, and make sure the access matches the other questions. What I mean by that is, if 1 is good, make sure 1 is always the good outcome. If 5 is bad, make sure 5 is always the bad. Don't switch them on one question. Low effort, you might be inclined to switch them. Don't do that. So just make sure it's a consistent scale. And as long as you're doing that and doing it consistently, usually you can derive some pretty good data outputs from it. But boy, there is about a bazillion debates around what is the ideal number of questions and options in your post-call transactional or post-service transactional surveys. So that's probably a better conversation to have offline. Hopefully that gives you a quick sense, though.
All right, next question. This seems like a big mindset shift for my team. What are the 2 to 3 things I can do tomorrow to start reducing effort for our customers?
Yeah, great question. In fact, we dedicate a whole chapter in the book to this very question. It is a journey. So to get customer effort right, as this question implies, is, boy, this is a big shift in our strategy and our mentality and our culture and then the climate of our service organization, let alone our company itself. Ease of doing business as a broader concept has implications for your sales organization, supply chain, back office. I mean, the list goes on and on. So let's just focus in on customer service at first. And what we find some of the very best companies doing, there's a couple of really interesting things. A lot of companies are doing what we kind of joke around as pizza and beer exercises. But what we mean by a pizza and beer exercise is assign a smallish group of tenured or seasoned reps, pull even a couple of perhaps untenured folks into the group, ask them to stick around after a shift, and hopefully you're not a unionized shop with your contact centers and can do some of this, but ask them to stick around and give them a project around the space of customer effort. Be it a web project. One of the most common that we see our members assign is asking the reps to identify why is it we force customers to channel switch. They hear it when customers switch. They know the customers who have first been on the web and what forced them to come over to the phone. Why is that? And let them help identify some of the common reasons we're forcing those customers to switch. Another really great exercise, and this is one we learned from one of our member companies years ago, is an exercise we call it capture the nose. Not nose like your body part nose, but nose like as in when we have to say no to a customer, where a policy inhibits us to give the customer the right answer. We just simply have to tell them, no, you can't have that, and to begin to log those no's. And what's really interesting is it creates a way for those reps to feel some ownership over identifying where we're creating hardships or creating effort for our customers, and then begin to pull together some teams to help them to help solution that. What are some of the things we can do to mitigate this, to inhibit it, to help prevent this? Language we can use, processes we can try to put in place. So I think involvement in the front line is very big and a good first place to start.
Great. Next question. In doing your surveys and data analysis, what was your breakdown between companies doing B2C and those doing B2B? Is there a difference in the breakdowns on stats?
Yep, awesome question. So I personally headed up our B2B service desk for years before we even started on this research. So we were very careful to make sure we showed some B2B love. B2C is often the place that you see most of these efforts focused. In our global sample, we had about 1/3 of that total sample was B2B. It's a really nice sample that covers both what we would classify as perhaps more transactional sort of order fulfillment, order management type of environments, as well as more complex sort of break-fix type of environments, extended resolution periods, complex technical support. So that's all rolled up in the sample. What you find is that the story, the general story we went through today, holds in all those environments. There's a couple interesting exceptions in B2B where we do see a bit more opportunity to create positive loyalty in B2B. The most notable of those opportunities is if we can teach something to that customer. If we can teach them something about how to run their processes better, how to, manage their workflow a bit better, if we can do that in the course of a service interaction, the customer will grant us greater loyalty. That end user, in many cases, will grant us more loyalty. And then what we find is there's a good sort of corollary where they will advocate back to the decision makers inside their organization. And that does bode very well for them to renew or repurchase or do more business with you.
Great. Do you believe in surveying your customer base on how are we doing? If so, how often, and what do you think the optimum number of questions should be?
This is the root of this question really is a distinction between relationship level loyalty and transactional loyalty. What I mean by that is there are a variety of metrics out there that track what I would deem to be more relationship level loyalty, which is kind of across all the touch points that you, the customer, have with us, the company. How are we doing, right? And I guess you could ask this question at more of a transactional level, but let's just talk about relationship versus transactional loyalty questions, because there's an important distinction for most of us that operate in a service capacity. Those broader relationship level questions are very, very difficult to analyze down to root cause drivers. There's a lot of noise those questions pick up. So Net Promoter Scores come under a lot of heat, for example, recently, and a lot of you will know that question as the recommendation question. How likely are you to recommend? It's come under a lot of heat lately because there's been a lot of misuse of that metric, trying to take that metric and use it at a transactional level, use it as a metric to understand root cause drivers. It just is not a question that was intentioned to do that. It was a question that helps understand kind of this whole idea. How are we doing? At more of a relationship level, and relative improvement in that NPS score for one given company does correlate to growth. The problem became many companies tried to benchmark it company to company. We tried to introduce it into all these different channels, all these different touch points, and use it as a transactional metric. It doesn't work like that. That is now where we go to transactional metrics. We like our customer effort score because it is intended at that transactional level. Even metrics such as customer satisfaction, sort of the standard out there, I would argue is a poor transactional metric because there's too much noise it picks up. Are you satisfied? Well, you failed to resolve my issue, but I'm still satisfied. It's a very difficult metric to ascertain at an operational level what we need to do to improve that particular metric. It's just a loose correlation in there. And so I think that's a better question to ask is relationship level versus transactional. Relationship level questions like how are we doing generally are great for your marketing folks, for your brand folks. That matters a lot to them, but it includes a lot of touch points. And so driving it down to operational details and operational elements that you guys have to focus on, it's really tough to do that.
Great. Well, Nick, thank you so much. We are out of time today. There are a couple questions left in the queue, and I think we can take those offline and make sure we get those answered. But Nick, we appreciate your time so much. Fantastic content, fantastic research, and thanks everyone for joining the call today.
Thanks, Courtney. Thank you, everybody.